Everyone, today I wanted to talk about what I think makes a good review. These are things that I noticed the reviews that I really like watching have in common, and I also just wanted to set some guidelines for myself for if I ever review things on my channel. I'm literally using a laundry basket on top of an ironing board to prop up my phone so I can film this, so I hope I at least get props for creativity. The first thing that I wanted to talk about that makes a good review to me is the amount of time spent trying out the product. I really like it when someone spends at least a week trying out the product because any time less than that I feel like isn't enough time to really get a feel for things like application and wear time and how to remove the product and really get experience with the product under different conditions. So like the difference between wearing it around the house all day or wearing it out for an evening, things like that. Especially if it's like an eyeshadow palette with a lot of colors, I think it's important to really take that full amount of time to test it out because there is no way that you can possibly try out every single color in like a 15 pan or a 30 pan eyeshadow palette in like one day. So like something like a first impressions review isn't really my favorite thing. I think it's really important that the person has like at least a week of experiencing the product and trying it out. For something like a skincare item, I think that I could really extend that to even 2 weeks because I know with skincare it can take a while to really start seeing results, and you really need to include it in your daily routine for a while. So about 1 week for a color cosmetic and 2 weeks for a skincare item really seems about right for me. The next thing that I really like to see in a review is the amount of information that is provided on the product. So things like vegan status, whether it's cruelty-free or not, if it contains any kind of allergens, parabens, talc, things like that. I know that a lot of people aren't chemists and it's not necessary to provide a full ingredient breakdown if you don't really understand the different ingredients and what they do. But I do think it's nice when people like that, and I really do like to see that in a review. However, I think that just saying things like whether or not it contains stuff like talc or parabens, or if it's vegan or cruelty-free are pretty important to share. I also like when there's information about the shipping, so things like the cost of shipping, how long it takes to get there, the tracking, where it ships from, things like that. I know that if you've bought it from like a store or if you've got it sent to you in PR, you might not necessarily know those things, and I can understand that, but I appreciate it when somebody, even if they're sent something in PR or they walk over to the store and get it, they at least include some kind of shipping information for people who would be ordering it online. Another point about getting things in PR is I think it's important to include a release date if the thing that the person got hasn't been released yet. It really bothers me when somebody gets something in PR and does like a first impressions type review or even like a full thorough review and doesn't actually specify when the product is released, or even how much it costs. That's another really important thing. I think one of the first things you have to mention, and one of the first things that I would like to mention if I'm ever reviewing things, is the cost of the item itself. Moving on, another thing that I really like to see are swatches, preferably like live swatches, not just an image or a video that shows the swatches already applied to the arm. I really like to see the swatches being done so that I can see how many times they need to apply the product in order to build up the pigment, how it applies, things like that. I know that a swatch isn't really supposed to give you an accurate representation of how it applies, and how the application goes on the eyes or the face, but I do think that it's important to see swatches. I know that in my case, I definitely don't have the film set up to do like live swatches or anything like that, but if I ever am reviewing something that needs to be swatched, I think I would really like to do my best to like at least attempt live swatches, and if not, show an image of the swatch and kind of explain the process that I had to go through in order to do the swatch, whether I just applied it with my finger or a brush, whether I had to do one swipe or if I needed to do multiple swipes, whether I used a primer or not, Things like that I think are really important when it comes to swatches. I do think swatches are a pretty important thing to include because although they don't necessarily say how the product performs, they can give me a pretty good indication of how the product is going to look on the skin, especially if the person who's doing the review has a pretty similar skin tone to mine. It's really important to be able to tell how they might look together with your skin tone and your own undertones. The next thing that I think is pretty important is the description of the product itself. I know a lot of people like to start by talking about the packaging, and I do think it's an important thing to talk about, but my favorite reviews generally have a pretty limited description of the packaging, and if they go into detail, they'll normally talk about things like how the packaging performs, how the packaging helps you use the product, if it's like something like a mascara, kind of what the wand is like and how it helps you with the application, things like that. I don't really need like a description of how pretty the packaging is or talking about all the artwork on the box and stuff like that, because I think those are really things that I could see for myself or I could tell by looking on the website. So I think if I ever do like a review for myself on my channel, I would probably want to limit how much time I actually spend talking about the packaging and spend more time talking about the product itself. When it comes to describing the product itself, I think it's really important to use your own words in your description rather than just reading whatever's on the box or whatever's written online. Like, if I just wanted to read what the company had to say about the product, I could go do that myself. I don't need to watch somebody's review to figure that out. I think it's important for the person to physically look at the product and come up with their own description in their own words, because sometimes how the product physically looks might be different than what the company has to say about it. So it's important to kind of note if there's any difference with regards to those two descriptions. I also really like when people use their own words to describe the application of the product and speak from their own experiences from when they were testing out the product, rather than just reading whatever's written on the box or the website, whatever application instructions the company provides. Again, if I just wanted to read the instructions made by the company, I could go online and read them myself. I don't need a review to tell me that. What I do need a review for is to tell me the actual practical application compared to what the company suggests, or if there's a better method for application than what the company suggests, if there's different methods that work for different preferences, stuff like that. I think when somebody uses their own words to describe how they personally applied the product and how they personally found the application to be, that really makes the review a lot more credible and a lot more in-depth. Next thing that I think is really important in a good review is a breakdown of all the different pros and cons. I think that you can have a positive review of a product and still say some cons, like just because I really like something doesn't mean that there aren't some things that maybe aren't so great or that some people might not like. So it's important to list all the pros as well as any cons that there might be. And I also really like it when people don't make excuses for the different cons that a product might have. For example, like if an eyeshadow is really powdery and it has a lot of fallout, I'll sometimes hear people say, well, yeah, it does have a bit of fallout, but that's what makes it a super blendable shadow. Like, no, you can have something that's blendable that doesn't have a lot of fallout. And I think a better thing to say might be, yeah, it has a lot of fallout, so if you don't like that, you're not going to like this. I think the second statement kind of makes it seem a lot more credible, whereas the first statement seems like you're kind of making an excuse in order to save face for the company. I really like a thorough and honest list of pros and cons that don't make excuses for the things that maybe aren't perfect, because no product is going to be 100% perfect, and that's okay. And finally, every review has some key questions that I really like to see answered, and some key questions that I really think I'd like to make sure that I ask myself if I ever do a review. And the first question would be, is this worth my money? Clearly if I've reviewed something, I've gone out and I spent money on it, and I've tested it out, so I think that's a really important thing to discuss is it not just is it good, but also is it good enough that it justifies me spending that price on it? The next question, which sounds like the same thing essentially, is this worth your money or whoever's money might be spent if someone else goes out and purchases it based on the recommendation of the review, because it might be worth my money, but it might not be worth everyone else's money. It might not be worth someone's money if they have different preferences than me. So when I answer that question, I think I would really like to talk about who it might be worth it for and who it might not be worth it for. Also, I'd want to ask, would I regularly use this? If I've taken the time to test something out for a week, clearly I would have a pretty good idea of whether or not I'd regularly use it. And I'd be able to say, like, as much as I like this, do I think I would regularly use this, or is this something that I'd maybe only use once in a while? For some people, it's really important that the things that they have are things that they regularly use, so I'd really want to make sure to answer whether or not I think that this would be something that I would regularly use. The next question I like to see answered is who might like this and who might not like this. I think that even a really good and positive review can still talk about what kind of people with what kind of preferences might not enjoy the product. Maybe people with some skin tones would like the product and people with other skin tones might not. Maybe it's something that someone with a particular skin type might like and someone with a different skin type might not like. I think it's important to talk about what kind of preferences people might have and how this product caters to those preferences or how it doesn't cater to those preferences. Just because I like a product and I find it works really well for me doesn't mean that I think it's going to work really well for everyone. The next question I like to see answered is, do I have things like this? Oftentimes there are things that can be similar to a product or even exact dupes of a product, and if I have things that are similar to the product I'm reviewing, I think I would really like to talk about them and kind of throw them into the review as alternatives for people who are maybe looking for something different, people who are looking to support a different brand, or for people who are looking for something a little bit cheaper. I don't think exact dupes are a necessary part of every single review, but I do think it's important to mention if there are similar things that the reviewer has, or if there are similar things that are available on the market. So that's about all. I think I really covered the things that I think make a good review, and I think I've covered the things that I would like to include if I'm ever reviewing things on my own. I hope that you guys like this video. Let me know if you agree or if you have maybe any other thoughts. I would really love to hear some other thoughts and maybe have a discussion. But thank you so much for watching and stay tuned for more videos.